And welcome back to Saloon Sports Scout Talk, Season 1, Episode 3. I'm Walter, that's Ben, and we're back again as we approach the NFL draft, which is about a month away at this point. And today we're going to talk about wide receivers and some other topics, which we'll jump right now. And that's one of the biggest things you come across when looking at film is the schemes in college and how different they are than the NFL. Like that's one of the things that pop out, just how defenses and offenses play. Also, we consider the hash marks and how that's different in the college game as well. And the first topic of this week is how the college scheme makes it difficult to project to the NFL. And most of that revolves around the air raid, since that's very popular now. It used to be the option, triple option back in the day, popularized by Nebraska and Navy, who still uses it, I think. So that's what we're going to start off with, and especially when looking at quarterbacks, wide receivers, it makes it extremely difficult. We talked about in our early episode about Texas Tech and their run of quarterbacks over the past 10, 12 years, and how none of them are projected to the NFL at all. And we can also similarly do the same thing with Ole Miss wide receivers. They're not projecting, or Baylor wide receivers from air raid systems. They're not really putting up great numbers in the NFL. There are some exceptions, but a lot of them have an issue. Cowboys fans will remember Terrence Williams was big at Baylor. He put up decent numbers for the Cowboys for a couple of seasons, but he never turned into what you would want to have as a Z receiver.
Yeah, and he's a second round pick, if I remember correctly.
Third?
Third? He was a high pick that never amounted to anything.
That's a little harsh. He had a couple of decent seasons. Not what people thought he could turn into, but that's kind of, he came from that Art Briles, I believe the coach's name, air raid system at Baylor. And yeah, since I was looking at wide receivers and offensive line, also projecting from those systems is difficult. What have you, since you've looked at interior offensive lineman, what have you seen from those players that are in air raid? How is it making it more difficult to project how they'll translate to the NFL?
Yeah, it's always a little bit difficult when, especially for guys that are in an air raid system, like take Andre Dillard. I believe I mentioned him last week. It's tough to project a tackle like that in pass pro when they only have to block for 2 to 4 seconds normally. When they get the ball out that fast, you don't get to see how they deal with either a stunt or a good spin move or anything that the defense might throw at them, because the ball's already past the line of scrimmage and it's irrelevant what's going on.
Yeah, that's the same thing. Like, you also looked at quarterbacks as well. Yeah. And famously, there's a quarterback at Washington State that's put up better than video game numbers in an air raid system that causes some people to elevate him. But you felt that we're talking about Gardner Minshew at Washington State, that he still doesn't project what, in your opinion, to being a future starter in the NFL.
No, well, because I guess when you're looking at film from a player that's in those type of schemes, you have to see what they do on film. I know this kind of seems obvious, but when you look at, say, a quarterback, for instance, guys in an air raid scheme only throw primarily they only throw the ball 5 to 10 yards down the field. And in the NFL, you cannot do that and expect to be productive. That cannot be your main game plan moving forward in the game plan. You have to take into account all the different throws that a quarterback needs to make at the NFL level. And if they don't show that on film, it's tough to project them as high as some people are projecting Gardner Minshew to go. And if you look over the course of the history of air raid quarterbacks, there's only a handful of guys that actually made it to the next level and contributed at a high level. Off the top of my head, Patrick Mahomes. We'll see what Kyler Murray does. I don't have. We'll see what Cliff Kingsbury has in store, but Goff had a Goff might be good. The jury's still out on that, but by and large, those type of quarterbacks don't do much at the NFL level.
Yeah, and that's of course he was alluding to the Arizona Cardinals go through and draft Kyler Murray for taking Josh Rosen
It's the rumor
early. Yeah, that'll be interesting to say the least. And for example, I looked at wide receivers this week, and I looked at running backs. It's also a weird way to look at it because when a wide receiver has a very limited route tree, it makes it extremely difficult to project what they can and cannot actually do. You can see on film what they can do over repetition and what they actually practice, but that's not always good enough to see how it's going to translate, especially at the different wide receiver, the X, the slot, and the Z. What can they play, or can they play it well? Can they beat a press, which is a scheme, which is all talking about defenses. In the NFL, you're not going to have corners playing 10 to 12 yards off of you. Like that's something you see all the time in college. That's not going to happen in the NFL.
Yeah.
That's not a thing. So
only when you're 3rd and 20.
Yeah. That's just something you see in college all the time when you see these wide receivers operating with all that space. Well, your route running doesn't become as important. You don't have to be a technician. You have all that cushion to work with, and it makes it a lot easier. So that's one thing that I've seen, especially with wide receivers. Running backs, it's a little easier to see that. I haven't seen too many running backs I looked at didn't play in the air raid, but on the flip side, a lot of these schemes in the college running backs aren't asked to catch the ball ever. And that's not something that's going to happen in the NFL. You're going to have to see if you can actually catch the ball. Can you run a route? So that's a little bit of a different translation there as well. You do see them blocking for the most part, or trying to, or not trying to, depending on who we're talking about. So that's a little different as well. So those are definitely some key things that when you're looking at a player and trying to address the film, that it can make it difficult because of just how college football is played. Now, I'm not saying it's a different game, but it's definitely approached differently than NFL offenses and defenses and how they go about it. So that's just one thing that's always jumped out to me when we're looking at that.
Yeah,
and
there's only a handful of teams that actually play a pro-style offense or pro-style defense. Most of it now is just spreading the field and just trying to find open lanes.
And that's actually what, when I was breaking down Carson Wentz when he was coming out, was what impressed me the most, because North Dakota State at the time was running a pro-style offense, and he was taking snaps from under center and dropping back and showing that he could actually read a field. And I was like, that's not something you see a lot. And I graded him as a second rounder, top of the second round, and he was drafted really early, which is what you expect with quarterbacks, for them to teams to reach on them, which is normal and fine. And I guess if you were asking an Eagle fan, he's panned out other than the injuries. So that's an impressive thing, and a quarterback who does play in a pro style system, that's making the translation over to the NFL so much easier. And that transitions perfectly to our next topic of drafting based on film versus potential. And that's an interesting topic, especially with the conversations you hear, especially on social media, from scouts on what they project the player to be, and film doesn't show that at all, like even a little bit. When you're looking at offensive linemen or quarterbacks or any position that you're scouting, how do you approach the potential aspect of it? Is that something you would feel comfortable drafting on, or do you want to see the film?
You definitely want to see the film. I think when you gauge potential, you also have to take in mind what scheme they're being drafted into. There's some, like when you take offensive linemen, for instance, there's some offensive linemen that you see them run like a zone scheme more often than not, and you take them based on their potential of how they performed in that scheme. Where on the flip side, you have guys that run more of a power run scheme, and you look at them to bring in that. But when you're trying to draft somebody that's in a different scheme, you look at body size, hands, upper body strength, or play strength more often than not. And at the end of the day, it's really throwing darts at a dartboard. You just gotta hope that your gut feeling on their potential matches up to what they do.
That's interesting. Me, like, there's a couple I've looked at interior defensive linemen, and the whole drafting off of potential kind of scares me to death. Like Ed Oliver, the film doesn't match what people are saying about him. I mean, he's a guy, he puts up tremendous workout numbers, but when it comes down to the film, it doesn't scream, I need to take you in the top half of the first round. So I would be scared to do something like that. There's wide receivers, which I looked at this week. I haven't looked at DK Metcalf yet, but people were wanting to take him in the top half of the first round, despite the film not matching that completely in most people's minds. So when it comes to if it was my job at stake or I'm a scout that wants to get on the table for that person, I'm gonna do that based off film and not what I think they might be, because I mean I have no way to say that this coach is going to coach them up, or that if we have the same coaches in place and that same scheme in place, how he's going to fit into that scheme. So that also comes into a big play, as you a big part of the consideration that you mentioned is like, what scheme are we drafting for? How is this player going to fit in this scheme? And do I want to project a player into a scheme that he hasn't played in? And am I going to do that enough to take them and to take them above where I think they should be based off the film? That to me is a scary proposition. Now, I don't want to be that guy responsible for that pick, especially if it's like top 10. I don't want to do that. Give me a center who is projected to be all pro. I'll take that in the top 10 because that's a safe pick, rather than
we'll get to that.
Quarterback or wide receiver or something that's just going to, you hope they turn into like Randy Moss or something. And it's like, yeah, I'm not comfortable doing that. But I mean, evidently a ton of scouts and teams disagree with me, because you see that almost every year, no matter what. And they're doing, I think when it comes down to is the combines, people really judge the combine a lot more than I do. I basically put no weight on it. Some others do. The only drills I really care about is the 20-yard shuttle and the 3-cone as far as skill positions. That's all I care about. 40-yard dash, who cares? Yeah, the only time you're gonna be running a straight line for 40 yards is there's a broken play and no one's in front of you. So
yeah.
I'm not sure how you would feel. Would you feel comfortable picking someone like an Ed Oliver or a DK Metcalf, or someone who screams and has great, I guess Paris Campbell is also another one who has great workout numbers, but the film may not say first rounder, but you feel that they have potential to turn into what you expect a first rounder to be?
Well, the simple answer is no. But you also have to take into fact, where are you drafting? What else is available on the board, and what are your other needs? If your primary need is defensive tackle, for Ed Oliver's sake, if he's the best defensive tackle you have on your board, then I guess yeah. But
don't know what film you're watching, but
yeah, exactly. I mean, I personally haven't looked at defensive tackle film yet. Just going based on what you told me. But
yeah, I was like, I don't know. Yeah, people that would say that based off the film, I'm like, I don't. Yeah,
I mean, my knowledge of Oliver, or what I've seen of him, is very limited. Like as an ECU fan. I've seen him play against us, and he had his best game of his career against us. But then again, we also had a very terrible offensive line, so I have to take that with a grain of salt. There's a lot that goes into it, but at the end of the day, you have to trust the film. And, based off potential, I would take film over what you think he can do. Because the film shows you what he can do as opposed to what he might be able to do at the NFL level against guys who are just as fast, if not faster.
I guess a good example would be we can go like at 2 recent Cowboys picks. Oh, 3. First, we'll start with Dez Bryant. He dropped into I think Cowboys drafted him at 23 or something. He dropped. I think a lot of that was attitude related, but when you look at what Dez Bryant was good at, route running wasn't his thing. His technique wasn't his thing. It was his ability to make big plays. And basically, when you're drafting in the 20s, you're basically drafting at what you consider a second-round player anyway. So that's fine. But then let's go look at another guy, Travis Frederick. I remember lots of Cowboys fans being quite upset the Cowboys picked him in the first round. I was like, why are you picking a third-round player in the first round? Wasn't a normal thing. It was like, well, that's not what the film said. And he turned into an all-pro. And another example would be Taco, which I know you feel, Taco Charlton, which I know you feel strongly about. And you probably want to bring up TJ Watt, which is fair at this point. Is like that.
One of them's a Pro Bowler. The other one is not.
That was more of a potential pick, I would guess.
It's based on size. Taco's a big guy.
Yeah, Taco's very long. He looked Renell Wren, like I talked about last week. He, as far as length, size, Renell Wren looks like Taco. I'm not saying he plays like Taco on film or anything like that. Not big on comparisons, but that's the size of Renell Wren. Like that's what I guess Marinelli was big on that pick. I don't really know the backstory there, but I guess was a potential he can develop type thing. He still might develop into something. You would hope.
As a first round pick, I'd hope so, but I'm not hopeful.
So those are different ways that Cowboys have done it. You could say like one of them hasn't worked so far, the other 2 have. So when you look at all the Cowboys picks that are potential in film, for the most part they've hit it out of the ballpark, other than the Taco pick as of late. All have been all pros besides Taco at one point or another, and since 2010, I believe. So there's different ways to look at it. And again, as you mentioned earlier, it comes down to need or your grades, trusting your board. If this player is with the best that we have and we kind of have a need for it, I guess we take it. Especially if it's in the lower half of the first round. There's, I think on average, there's about 10 to 15 first round grades per team every year. So that means about 17 players in the first round getting drafted aren't going to have first round grades.
Yeah.
So
it's really a crapshoot at that point.
So it just happens. Fulfill your needs, I guess, at that point. So I guess that's, I don't know. I mean, it's to me, it's hard. I don't want to ever draft one I think that this player is going to turn into this. I think that's what teams do with quarterbacks all the time in the first round, and that
especially
does not work out a lot. I mean, that fails a lot. I'd rather wait to the third and get someone. I mean, not every team is going to get lucky, depending on who you ask, like the Cowboys did in the 4th round, and get Dak Prescott, who goes to a Pro Bowl and wins a bunch of games for you. He has his deficiencies, but he wins.
Yeah. Well, Dak's success is a product of Will McClay's draft strategy in large. He was put in the right situation for him to succeed. Well, especially when you have Zeke and 4 all-pro offensive linemen leading the way. That makes a big difference.
That helps a bit. So it does come down to how everything pans out for your board, your strategy. Because even when you look at the Taco draft, I mean, that first round pick was about the only one that was really, you look at as like, is bad.
Yeah.
Thus far. I mean, You have Cheeto in the second round. You have Lewis in the third round. The fourth round, I believe that was Armstrong. I believe that was Armstrong.
Wasn't Randy Gregory in that draft? Or was that the one before?
That was before. I was
Oh,
I think it was 20.
My apologies.
Second round.
Yeah.
Interesting story with him, but
another time.
Yeah. But yeah, well, so it's like there's draft strategies and teams have different approaches, and it's interesting to look at. But I don't feel the need to draft on potential in the first round. I want to draft on the film in the first round. Potential 5 through 7.
Yeah,
I'll do that. Rounds 5 through 7.
I definitely agree. Like, if anything on the first or second day, you need to be certain of who they are as a player, not what they can be.
Give me a quarterback every year in rounds 5 through 7, and
yes.
I think that's pretty safe to do that. Or running back, quarterback rounds 5 through 7. You'll get a hit at some point.
Wide receiver, for that matter.
Yeah, there's been some Antonio Brown. If you wanted, hopefully, if you draft a wide receiver that late, doesn't have always going to turn into having that big of an ego. But that's another story. But yeah, that's just different strategies, different scouts think different things. That's why in our breakdowns we put in projections as well, because I mean that comes into play. I mean teams have guys are graded in the third round and they drop to the sixth and they take them then. So where someone's drafted doesn't always match where a team had them graded. So that's very normal. And that's done, and that kind of transitions into our next kind of topic, which is coaching versus coachability in college, and what has the biggest effect. Like, I brought this up because of what I've been seeing on some of the film. It just looks, it's either they're not, players aren't being coached to do certain things, or coaches are like, well, I don't have to teach them this because it's not going to come up at this level, or the players aren't taking to it. Like it's hard to know unless you're at a practice and you have that access. But whether players don't learn to retain, or they don't have the greatest instincts, I think that's a worthy debate that's not really discussed much, because there's no way to know, because teams usually close off practices. But I would just think, especially like looking at defensive tackles and wide receivers, that your coach is going to talk to you about technique and strategies and how to be a technician at those positions. And a lot of these guys, going back to Ed Oliver, you don't see that play after play. You don't see them having an approach. And with some wide receivers, you see them kind of like fade and drift on routes time after time after time. It's like, are you not being coached this, or do you not care because you have 7-8 yards cushion? Like what is it? What's your take on that?
Well, from a former offensive lineman, I was grilled with technique. And basically because at the end of the day, when fatigue sets in, technique is all you have left. And after looking at the film for offensive line, there are only a handful of guys that actually have very good technique. Like, each one has their own individual flaws, but it just seems like that's not really coached much anymore. Or not that it's not coached anymore, but it's kind of been thrown to the wayside rather than getting production, rather than developing good technicians at their own individual positions.
It goes back to scheme. Is that the scheme?
Scheme seems to be triumphing everything in college these days.
Yeah, that's just, there's like a lot of these players are coming from some version of a spread or air raid where you don't have that many cues. You do one thing or another, and that's it. Like that, you're not supposed to think. You just do
Yeah.
this. And then, like, if back to the air raid, if a quarterback, if the ball's supposed to be at the quarterback's hand in second and a half to 2 seconds, I mean, the offensive line just has to stay in the way, just stay in the way. Like
force a stalemate.
Like,
that's all you got to do.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, it's like, I don't. If the coaches are coaching to this game, can you say they're doing a disservice to the player, or are they more? Can you blame them for being more worried about their job? Like, what? I mean,
my gut says yeah.
It's I don't know. It's kind of a tough conversation to have, again, without specifically knowing, but it's just looking at some of the players. It's like, you are doing the same thing and it hasn't worked. Like, do you not have another trick? I mean, this happened with Ed Oliver. Like, you would, if the first thing doesn't work, it just keeps bashing your head against the wall and keep trying and trying and trying. And it's like, well, the best technician so far, any of the positions I've seen where it comes into play, has been Jerry Tillery, but he's intelligent, therefore undraftable or something. So you don't see that a lot, like, where players are actually progressing through the game and thinking on the field. It's like, oh, I set him up with this before and it worked. I can get him with something else because he's going to react. He's going to overreact to that. You don't see that. Like, in wide receivers, it's a little different, but it's still, the technique seems to not be a thing. It's like, you're really athletic. Go be athletic. And I mean, with the translation from skilled players in the air raid to the NFL, it seems like the learning curve for those positions at the NFL is too big, and they're not all of them are not translating. Like, I guess that's going to be one of the interesting things to see for all these Ole Miss wide receivers. Are they going to be able to translate over to learn that much and to be able to take the coaching? Because that's the thing that's the biggest difference. Because when the Dallas Cowboys were doing the training camp live tape, and you saw Ron Marinelli yelling at defensive tackles and defensive linemen, yeah, that coaching is intense in the NFL, especially if you're not, especially if you're just used to doing a slower pace or whatnot. It's like, when you hear like teams talk about like what the coaching is like, it's like these players are going to have, if the learning curve is that big, and say you're drafted in the fourth round on, where you're not exactly safe your first couple of years, is that going to be too much stress and too much on you to learn? And so, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, it's a lot there, but you can definitely see it on the film that there's something not translating. And if it's the coaches themselves or if the players not being coachable.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen a lot of players rely more on their physical ability than what they're able to do as far as what the position demands, if that makes sense. As far as technique and stuff like that, like especially at offensive line, there's some guys that have the physical play strength to just throw guys around, but at the same time they don't have proper footwork to keep up in pass protection. Like that, it seems like pass protection would be one of the first things that somebody learns, especially in a pass happy football that we have now, like college and NFL.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I've been seeing that I think is dipped as far as college to the NFL is offensive line play. It's like there are so many bad offensive lines in the NFL.
Yeah, but we've had this conversation before, but that's true to some extent. But also at the same time, pass rushers are just getting so much bigger and more athletic than they used to be, and it's tough to really pinpoint what's the biggest factor in that. But I would, after looking at a lot of O-line film, I would say that technique has taken a step back.
Yeah, I mean, speed, like Montez Sweat running a 4.42 at the end edge is like, yeah, he's fast. I mean, that's you wouldn't think is like a defensive end is running a 4.42. Like what?
Yeah.
But I mean, but at that position, I mean, his name just skipped my head. But the Ohio State defensive end, his brother's in yeah, Bosa. He runs like a 4.7, 4.8.
Yeah, which is more traditional for end. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like his technique and his bend is what takes him over the top. So it's not all going to be like just the speed. So
well, it's a combination of speed and power. Like that's especially maybe over the last decade or so, like that's really taking a huge step forward from the edge rusher.
I agree. It's more. Even looking at players like Randy Gregory, like the athletic freaks. I mean, David Irving, before he decided to get into the cannabis business.
Marcus Ware.
D. Ware is that dude was. Yeah, long. I mean, that's talking about Taco. That might be why Cowboys were so quick. Is like kind of look like D. Ware.
That's a valid point.
So I mean, like I don't know. It just seems to be when I see someone with great technique on film, I'm like, oh wow, that's new. What is this? Who coached you in high school? Because nobody else here is doing that. So yeah, I guess that's where we can jump into our talk about interior offensive linemen, wide receivers, and you're up with the interior offensive line and who you looked at and what you think of them.
Yeah. All right. So as far as my top 10, I'll just go ahead and list them out real quick, and then I'll dive right into the breakdown. I've got Garrett Bradbury out of NC State, Connor McGovern out of Penn State, Michael Dieter out of Wisconsin, Eric McCoy out of Texas A&M, Chris Lindstrom out of Boston College, Michael Jordan out of Ohio State, Drew Samia out of Oklahoma, Ben Powers out of Oklahoma, Lamont Gaillard from Georgia, and the last is Elgton Jenkins out of Mississippi State.
Now, which one of those are centers? Like
centers would be Bradbury, McCoy, Jordan, Gaillard, and Jenkins. So out of my top 10, I have 5 centers that are there. But the good thing about center is you could easily make the transition from center to guard, and it's a fairly smooth transition. You just have to pick which side is more dominant and put that foot back. It's not that difficult to make that transition at the NFL level. So Bradbury, I have him graded as a top of the second prospect, but his stock has really risen over the past few weeks, and I expect him to go in the second half of the first round. Really, he's getting a lot of chatter there. But he last year he won the Wilmington Trophy as the nation's best center, and he just plays with a nasty streak. Like when you watch his film, like he can snap the ball and get off and beat the defender off the line of scrimmage. Like that's very rare for a center, just because to snap, to have a perfect snap and move that way, it's hard to do. He keeps his head on a swivel, rarely misses an assignment. He's an aggressive run blocker that excels in drive, combo, and reach. Like he has perfect footwork and landmarks to get to those. And he's impressive technique, and he's only played offensive line for 3 years. Like he's converted tight end, and he just has a high football IQ. He also has experience at guard. Like he's played 2 seasons at center and 1 at guard, so he has the flex to play multiple positions at the next level. But I expect him to be an all-pro center when it's all said and done. Going at number 2 would be Connor McGovern out of Penn State. I've had him graded at the top of the second as well. I expect him to go late first, early second. He's 3-year starter, and he's got experience at guard and center. Very athletic for his size, good lateral movement, excellent puller. But he needs to take better angles to the backside linebacker. But he's still, even with the bad angles, he's still capable of sealing off and recovering. So that's good to see. He's susceptible to twists and stunts, so he's got to work on that a little bit. But he's got a knack of just locking on to the breastplate of the defender and finishing his blocks, which it's really fun to watch. Michael Dieter, left guard out of Wisconsin, top of the second grade as well. He'll probably go somewhere in the early to mid second round. He was a 4-year starter, 2-time All Conference at tackle and guard, and he was an All American at guard as a senior. He played a few games at center as well, so that type of versatility is going to be looked upon highly for NFL teams. The biggest problem with him is against a bull rush, he can be put on skates, and he struggles to recover once he's beat. So he'll need to work on that. He's got decent mechanics, great hand placement with a good time punch. And he kind of lacks a lateral movement. So he comes with his downfalls as well. The next is Eric McCoy out of Texas A&M. He's the top of the second round grade. I know I've said a lot of the guys are top of the second round grade, but mathematically they've all come out to be just very fractionally different. Like the order of these could change for any team just depending on their need and how they perceive this player to fit in their scheme. But McCoy, he's as fast and agile as they come. He takes great angles and engages the second level linebackers and just mauls them over. He's fantastic in space, and when you watch screenplays run by Texas A&M, he's usually the lead blocker. Like, he's that fast, leading the running back behind him. Like, it's very rare to see from a center. He's got a high football IQ. He keeps his head on the swivel, and he's always looking for somebody to hit. He just loves to lock on and manhandle defenders. At number 5, I got Chris Lindstrom, right guard out of Boston College. I got him graded as a mid-round second, and he'll probably go somewhere in the second, maybe third, but definitely on the second day. He moves well for his size. He put together an impressive combine. 4.940, which for offensive lineman is kind of irrelevant, but it's still good to note his athletic ability. But I was really impressed by his broad jump, which is 119, which is far higher than what offensive lineman normally does. So that just goes to show his explosion from his lower body. And he also had a 4.54 shuttle. So his lateral movement is very, very fast for somebody of his size. He's great at the base. He's real menace to linebackers. He plays with an aggressive intent. Like, he just loves to lock on and throw somebody in the dirt. He also has experience at guard and tackle. So he has that type of versatility. The next is Michael Jordan out of Ohio State. I got him graded at the end of the second round. He'll go somewhere on the second day. He's a decent puller, but he needs to take flatter angles when he's going to kick. Oftentimes he gets a little bit deep, and the defender that he's supposed to kick out can get inside and make the play. So he's got to work on that. But an interesting fact is he's the first offensive lineman at Ohio State to start as a freshman since Orlando Pace. All conference at guard as a sophomore, and all conference as a center as a junior. So that's good company to be in for an offensive lineman. A little sluggish out of his stance, but he's still strong enough to recover and at least force a stalemate at the very least. Like, he doesn't mess up that bad. Like, very rarely is a sack his fault. He's good enough to recover. At number 7, I've got Drew Samia out of Oklahoma. I've got a mid-third round grade on him. I project him to go somewhere in the third or fourth. It just depends on scheme. But he's an aggressive blocker, but sometimes his emotions get the best of him, and he was ejected and suspended for a game against West Virginia for throwing a punch. So he comes with a little bit of baggage. He's a decent puller, but oftentimes he relies on chop blocks when he's trying to pull and kick, which against good edge rushers, they can spot that coming and just throw him aside. So he needs to work on being able to actually lock on and block properly. He's quick to the second level. He's quick to the second level, but he'll take poor angles sometimes to that backside linebacker. He's got a good first step, but he'll turn his shoulders too soon. He needs to have a better punch. Usually, his hands can be swatted away too easy, and if that's a problem at the college game, it's only going to get worse at the NFL level. He's not very patient. He tends to lunge a little too much rather than let the defender come to him in pass pro, which is what you're taught to do. Taught to punch while the defender's rushing you, and his footwork just isn't up to par. And by no next is his teammate Ben Powers. Didn't intend on them being back to back, but that's just how the rankings kind of worked out. I've got Ben Powers also as a mid third round grade. He'll probably go somewhere the same range, the third or fourth. He also commits very early in the pass pro, and his shoulders will turn too soon, which leaves him vulnerable to delayed blitzes. Several times that happened, and Kyler Murray was forced to flush out. He has good hands, and he actually keeps his feet chopping after the point of contact, which you would think that most linemen would do that, but after the film I've watched, a lot of guys just stay stagnant. Pass pro, his footwork needs work. He's a little sluggish on his mirror shuffle, which is a little bit different than run blocking where you have to keep your foot chopping. But he is an excellent combo blocker. He can tag team with the center or tackle and also keep his eyes on the linebacker that he's supposed to block. At number 9, we got Lamont Gallard out of Georgia. Got him at the end of the third round. I expect him to go somewhere between the third and the fifth. He's an interesting prospect. He's a converted defensive tackle out of high school. He spent his freshman year as a reserve, but where he got a lot of practice at different levels or different positions on the offensive line. He became a starter as a sophomore at guard and moved to center as a junior, and he became a all SEC first team as a senior. And he's just got a nasty mean streak. If you've seen for you, I know you've seen a lot of defensive tackle film, and that nasty mentality, just relentlessness. He just plays with that as a center, and it's rare to see. He gets a great push at the point of attack, and his hands stay inside, and he always keeps his feet chopping. But he's really got a problem with being overly aggressive, especially in pass pro. He tends to lunge a lot rather than let the defender come to him and react to what he does. He also lets his emotions get to him a little too much as well. He also has a problem with getting distracted by peripheral rushers, and he'll also bail in his gap while trying to help out the guy next to him. And that's just going to be a problem at the next level, because if there's anything that defensive coordinators at the NFL love to do, it's that delayed blitz. And if you're starting him, that's always going to be in the back of your mind. Is he going to allow my quarterback to get sacked because of that? And to wrap up my top 10 is going to be Elton Jenkins out of Mississippi State. I've got him graded at the end of the third round as well. Probably goes somewhere fourth or fifth round. He spent 2 years as a reserve. He also played every position on the offensive line. He plays with a lot of excuse me, he had 29 reps at the combine at the bench press, which for interior offensive lineman is a lot, but he doesn't play with that type of play strength on film. He's more of a stalemate blocker than somebody that's just going to lock on to the defender and do with what he wants, which I was kind of disappointed to see. He doesn't regularly win the leverage battle. He's good. He's a good combo and working at the middle linebacker. His quick feet allow him to mirror the nose or one technique fairly well. Unfortunately, his problem is he plays too tall. After the snap, he'll pop up and he can be pushed back with the against a smaller defensive tackle. And his hands are usually too wide, what you want for a center. And he just catches the defender, leaving him vulnerable to a lot of holding calls, which I think he had several on film that I watched. And if they caught that at the college level, then he's going to get called more at the pro level. So that's something to keep in mind.
Before I get to wide receivers, you mentioned a couple of things. Why is chopping your feet important for offensive line when they're run blocking?
Oh, because when you chop your feet, you got to keep your momentum going rather than just lock up and hold tight. Because when you lock up and hold tight, you can lose leverage, and the defender can slip through and make the play. So if you keep your momentum going, you give your running back more time to make his move and get past that front line of defenders.
And by combo blocking, explain that.
Okay, so combo blocking is when two offensive linemen double team one guy on the defensive line and work up to the play side linebacker that's supposed to be filling that gap.
Which in college doesn't happen all the time. But yeah, just wanted to clarify those couple of things before I jumped in, and great work there. It does seem like sounds like there's some length in the interior offensive line this year.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
It sounds like there's some length that within the interior offensive line for teams if they want to get somebody to work with in the mid round.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of out of the 10 from this week. There's probably three or four that I think could start right away. Most of them probably would need some coaching. It really depends on which scheme. Gaillard, for instance, he could probably start right away for a power run scheme, but if he's drafted by a pass-heavy team, he's going to need some time to learn.
Okay, and now we'll jump in at wide receiver. I've done 5 wide receivers thus far, and some of the bigger names aren't here, but some big names are here. There's definitely going to be some conversation. And from the 5 I've looked at, I'll break them down as far as the order I have them in. And the first 2 are actually within tenths of a point within one another. So they basically would be touching on the board. And that's Hakeem Butler from Iowa State and Paris Campbell from Ohio State. Then A.J. Brown from Ole Miss is 3rd. Then Hollywood Brown from Oklahoma is 4th. And N'Keal Harry, 5th from Arizona State. And I will talk about each one of them right now. Hakeem Butler, he is a darling, the pet cat of a lot of online scouts. He's 6'5", 227, long, lean. He's not overly muscular like the guys from Ole Miss. And that's actually a compliment. He ran 4.48 at the 40. He didn't run the agility drills, which is interesting. But on film, he did show flexibility and coordination. He didn't look stiff running. So I'm not exactly sure why he didn't do it, because I think with how other wide receivers like DK Metcalf basically failed the agility drills. Ben mentioned there was a couple of offensive linemen who had better shuttle drills or shuttle numbers than Metcalf did. So I'm not sure why Butler chose not to. I'm not alarmed by that, though, because on the film I saw, he did not seem stiff at all. He's a good athlete. He's got good balance. He doesn't have elite game speed, but he has good enough game speed from what you expect. He's got good coordination. His change of direction is good. He doesn't have the quickest feet, but he's got really good balance. He's a tough and competitive player. I like what I saw from him. He's not always consistent against better defenses, which is a little alarming. We can go into the next level, but he did put up good production, and he's willing to do the dirty work as a wide receiver. He's got a big frame, which will allow him to block and do multiple things for you, and depending on the scheme, which is another good thing about Butler. I think he can fit into any scheme, and he has position flex, which I'll get into in a bit. He seemed to be coached up from earlier segment, he seemed to understand the finer points of wide receivers. Ohio State had a pretty. There's a lot of vertical routes with Ohio State, or Iowa State, excuse me. But he had some concentration drops at times where the ball just literally went through his hands, so he wasn't completely concentrating. But that's not a huge issue on his film. I think that's easily something that can be coached up and fixed. That's not that big of a problem. He plays extremely strong as well. He's a strong blocker. He's willing to run block. He's willing to get there in there, do dirty, whether it's on the screen or whatnot. He will block. He's a team player and is not afraid to do that. He's durable. His size gives him that durability. I don't expect him to have a lot of injuries at the next level. He was a big play machine. He averaged 22 yards per catch this past season. So he can get down the field. He makes big plays. That's definitely a good thing for teams that are looking, especially who are looking for wide receivers that can stretch the field and get down the field and make those contested catches, especially with the direction the NFL is going with pass-happy offenses. He, from wide receivers I looked at, Butler to me has the best pair of hands thus far. He does have some lapses, but mostly those comes with concentrations. He's quick out of his break, and he can fight for a clean release. He didn't need too many presses, but I think with his size and strength that he'll be able to fight through the press. He has great ability to adjust for the ball in the air. He's a deep threat. He can run after the catch. When I saw him really struggle was on short and intermediate contested passes when he had to go below his waist. He's 6'5", so that's kind of a long way down. But I saw him struggle there. That might be a problem in the NFL. That's something he'll need to work on. But when the ball is above his waist and that's contested, no problem. Jumping, no problem. He's a really good blocker, by far the best blocker that I've seen at wide receiver. But my mathematical grade for him was basically on the cusp of the end of the second, the top of the third range. But he fell in within the top of the third. There's a lot of people online scouts think Butler is they're in their top two of the wide receivers. I'm not sure if that's going to be how it's going to end up for me, but I do think that he can go and I project him going between the second and fourth round. I'm leaning more towards the second round because I feel while he played against Big 12 defenses, and there's a running joke that what defense in the Big 12, there is that consideration, but I feel that he has flexibility to play the X, the Z, and slot, which is important. I feel he's got an extremely high ceiling. He could turn into an elite X. And at worst, I feel that he's a medium four. He can turn into a servable Z or slot player. I don't think he has this bottom floor where he's just going to be out of the league in a couple years. So I think he can be coached up. If he falls into the third round, I think that's going to be a steal for someone because I think he has the potential to do a lot of different things for you. And he already has the flexibility. I mean, he's going to have to work on his route running, getting that better, the catches, and all those things. But I think he's going to be a good NFL player that could turn into a Pro Bowler if he's coached up and he works at his craft. But I'm not sold on him being a first round pick because of some of the question marks that he has. But I do like the tape I saw of him. And then next is Paris Campbell, who is a interesting player. He's 6 foot 205. He ran a 4.31 at the combine, which I believe tied with Andy Isabella for the fastest at the combine. Then he ran in the elite 4.03 20-yard shuttle, so he doesn't have any problem getting in and out of breaks. He's flexible around in the hips. He has game speed. He has elite game speed. He's not just a tester as far as running. He can be, if he's in the open field, good luck catching him. So he doesn't have the best. He has elite feet, elite change of direction. He's flexible, but he's not always coordinated. You can see that he doesn't. He's not a natural wide receiver. He did pull a running back in high school, so he just spent a couple years in college learning the wide receiver position. He's not a natural at it. So that's where the question marks come in for him. And he didn't produce at Ohio State at wide receiver until his junior season. So his first 2 years were pretty much learning curve and not doing much at all. His freshman year, he basically didn't do anything on offense. So that could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. You might have room to still grow, or you might take him some time to learn and retain. But I think he still might have some room to grow and has some potential. When you look at his comments to the press, he's fiery. It seems like he's a leader. He doesn't quit. You don't see him go out of his way to really try to block, so that's a little concern. He's not always productive against upper-level talent. He can. He has some bumps and bruises. So it'll be interesting to see how tough he is going over the middle and blocking when he needs to. At the next level, because he is 6 foot 205, so he's big enough to do it. Does he have the will to do it? Well, that's going to be a question that I think some scouts should have. I have those. He does. Again, he's made some big strides at the wide receiver, so he did learn to retain some information, and he got better. He says, I don't think he's solid instincts, but he's going to need a lot of work at the next level to improve his instincts and becoming a natural wide receiver. So that's going to be something he's going to need to work on. Campbell doesn't play strong at all. You can see that when he's trying to block. And he was hurt by some minor injuries, so there might be some durability questions. And he also got hurt at his pro day a couple of days ago, which could drop his draft stock. I don't know. It was an ankle injury. We'll see how that's going to play out. But he is a legit explosive play threat. Every time he touches the ball and has any room to run, he can take it to the house at all times. He's definitely a work in progress when it comes to becoming a technician at wide receiver. He can definitely defeat zone coverage, which is why I think he can definitely become an immediate slot player with potential to become a Z, but he's going to need a lot of work if he's going to become a solid Z at the next level. He was able to get clean releases due to his speed. His route retrieval will have to expand because he wasn't asked to do a lot of different specific route running at Ohio State. But again, he is a deep threat. He can run out for the catch. He's going to have to work to his hand-eye coordination, adjusting to the ball. He's just not a natural receiver, and he's going to have a lot of work to do there. And I don't expect him to be a big blocker at the next level. My mathematical grade from again was at the end of the second, top of the third range. I project, due to his combine, that he might go at the bottom of the first or in the second round, because he has an extremely high ceiling and a medium floor. His injury concerns might cause him to drop to the second. We'll see. Or I don't think he'll be there in the third. That would be a little surprising because of the potential. So yeah, I do project he's going to be a Z or slot player. I think it would be a mistake to put him at X where you can't put him in motion or get him to move. Yeah. So I do think that he needs to be able to go in motion to move. I don't want people to get their hands on him. I think he'll have some return ability as well if the team wants to try and do that and take advantage of that. He has the potential to become a Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver, but I do think his floor would be a medium level slot receiver where he can get you some production, but just not an elite Juju Smith-Schuster type of slot receiver. He's definitely an interesting prospect. And after that, I have A.J. Brown from Ole Miss. So Brown, he ran a 4.49 at the combine, so that's good. But he does not have game speed. He has good game speed, but he definitely doesn't have elite game speed. That was a little concern. He shows that he has quick feet and he has good balance. Change of direction and flexibility were some issues that I saw. He doesn't look to be a greatest, most fluid athlete. And again, there's something in the water at Ole Miss for the wide receivers. All of these guys are jacked. And I think that might have something to do with it. Why he doesn't look as fluid as most persons. As far as Akeem Butler, Akeem Butler's lean. He's 6'5", 227. A.J. Brown is 6 foot, 226. So that you don't need to be that jacked to be wide receiver. And I think that might have something to do with that. But Brown is a tough player who but he did hang his head at times when Ole Miss was struggling. That a little concerning.
Yeah.
He did some things on the field. I didn't like that too much, but he does put up great and consistent production. He was by far the most productive wide receiver they had. Again, we talked about this earlier. The learning, retaining for Ole Miss and what they were asked to do at wide receiver. There are rumors that some routes for Brown were just run to space, literally run to space. Like that's not a technique. That's nothing. Just get to space. So Brown might have to learn how to run some routes. He did lose his concentration at times. His hands weren't as good as you would think they were. He had some drops. However, he did have some. I do appreciate his mental toughness because he grew up in Mississippi State country, and he still committed to Ole Miss despite being that, even though he got booed in his home high school on the signing day. So he's dealt with that. So, but I do appreciate that mental toughness to still follow what he wanted to do, even though he knew he was going to get critiqued where he grew up. He plays with strength. He's durable. And while he did have explosive plays, I don't know how that's going to translate into the NFL because he does not have great game speed. He's not that fluid in his movements. So I don't know. So I'm not sure how that's going to translate into the NFL as far as him being a big play threat. He did have some bad drops at times. And he rarely had to deal with press coverage, so that'll be interesting to see how he translates that. But I think he should because of his strength. He's initially quick, but again, the problems where it comes with him is going to be with his stiffness and his route run. He still showed good enough route running, but there's some problems there that he can fade upfield when coming out of breaking on a straight line. And he isn't always just consistent when adjusting the ball. Again, I think that comes down to his body type and how much muscle he has. He's still good after the catch. So there's that. My mathematical grade for AJ Brown was top of the third. I think.
Really? Okay.
I think he's going to be taken at the bottom of the first, top of the second type of range. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. But I think he has I think a lot of that will be because he has a very high ceiling, and I have him as a medium floor type of player. He has the ability to play Z in the slot. Again, I don't really want to see him with a limited tree at X, or I'm not sure how he's going to be able to completely deal with a press coverage. So I think when he's getting in his rookie season in the first couple of years in the league, that he'd be best used as a Z in a slot. He's a solid underneath target, and he can also be a downfield threat. So he does have some value, and so especially if you really like him, but you have him as a top of the third round pick, and he's there in the second, and you're at the top of the second, I think
it's not a stretch.
Fine. It's not a stretch. I can understand that with the potential. I would feel more comfortable taking him in the bottom half of the second round, but he might be there. There's a lot of ifs there with wide receivers, so I could see that. There are some things to like about him. But the drops are the most concerning thing with AJ Brown. Then we have Hollywood Brown from
Nice
Oklahoma. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Interesting guy. The one thing to point out about Hollywood Brown is he's 5'9", 166 at a wide receiver. Like, he is minusculely small. He didn't participate in the combine due to injury. He was expected to run around 4.35 and 40. He plays with elite game speed, but it's not Paris Campbell type game speed. So there is a difference there. He can change direction and he has quick feet, but again, he's got good balance, but he can be knocked off balance due to his size. Like, people can just bully him because he's so small and not extremely strong. He doesn't have that extremely strong play strength anyway, and you don't see him having the flexibility to get balls in the air or anything like that. But he is coordinated to get his shoulder square and get up the field. he is productive. He was productive in college, and he produced against upper level competition. He spent 2 years at Oklahoma. He he grew. He came in. He went to junior college as an early entry, then transferred to Oklahoma. He's willing to weave through traffic despite his below average frame, which when you're that small, that takes some courage.
Surprising.
And so again, he takes a pass on blocking, like you can see it. He almost don't blame him for his size, but yeah, he takes a pass on blocking. His mental awareness, again, this comes back down to learn and retaining. The air raid system didn't allow him to develop as a route runner, so he's far less polished in that area as I like. Whether he can learn that at the next level, that's an open question. But that's kind of where team meetings are going to come in. Like, do they think he can? He does have great instincts, especially with the ball in his hand. Like, he knows how to find open space and run with the ball. He doesn't play with strength. Like, that's never going to be a thing. If you get your hands on him in a jam or something, he's probably going to be done. Their durability is a question. Again, it's very small, and he's been hurt. He missed combine because he was hurt. But yeah, again, he's an explosive play waiting to happen. This big play, he gets in the open field and he starts running. You might just put 6 on the board. Very few people are going to be able to catch him. He is extremely raw in the finer aspects of being a wide receiver. He's going to need coaching up, especially on catching contested balls and tracking the ball in the air. He's going to need to work on that. He showed those skills at the combine, but again,
it's the combine.
Yeah. I don't weigh that. A lot of people did. It's combine. It's not. There was no DB there or anything. He didn't have to beat anything off the press. Like it's on air.
Yeah.
So I don't view that the same. He's going to need to he's going to learn to defeat press coverage that he didn't really see in college because of people were scared to death of his speed. Or he's just going to be a pure slot player, which isn't necessarily a horrible thing. It's just we would like to see the flexibility of him to also play Z, but again, he's small. He's 5'9". There's going to be some limitations there. So my mathematical grade for him is a mid-third. I have him as a high ceiling and a medium-ish floor, but teams are talking about taking him in the first or early second, so I project him to go there. From some rumors around that a lot of teams think he's going to be a day 2, second, third round player, but a couple of teams like him in the first. And again, no one takes one. I don't see him as a first round prospect. There's too many questions there about his route running, how he's going to be able to have clean release, his durability. But it's just purely a potential. And I don't like comparisons, but people say he's Deshaun Jackson or reincarnated. So that's going to, I guess, for the teams that think he's a first-round pick, that's why. Yeah. Because they think he's going to be able to be a deep threat like that. But I think he's going to mostly be used as a slot player. And as a team might try to develop as a returner as well. He may take some snaps at Z early in his career, but I don't know how effective he can be there due to his size and lack of polished route running. But, again, teams are going to value his high ceiling more than myself. But I guess I would feel comfortable taking him at the top of the third, bottom of the second if I had to. But first round, I wouldn't be on that train. That would not be something I would feel comfortable doing. And then the last guy we have, Harry, another big wide receiver at Arizona State. He was 6'2", 228, big guy. He ran a 4.53 at the combine. He did not do the agility drills. And it might have been a good thing for him because he was not the most fluid guy running, didn't have the quickest feet. So I think he might have problems coming in and out of his breaks at the next level, especially when he's going to see better competition. So I have some questions about his athleticism. He doesn't play that fast. He plays okay, solid game speed, 4.53. He plays like he runs 4.53. So that's pretty accurate, I think. He doesn't have the quickest feet or the best change of correction, but it's good enough that it shouldn't be a detriment to him. He's a competitive player that produces. He can't go quite against top shelf competition. I think that's why, because he just doesn't have that great change of direction and the complete polish in his route running and that technique. He does show good technique when instincts when adjusting to the ball. He does have some lapses in concentration, has some really silly drops that just shouldn't happen. There's not a guy within 2 or 3 yards of him, and he just drops the ball. So he's going to have to improve his route running and his concentration at the next level. He does show good strength and is durable. He can be a blocker. He has some explosive plays on his resume, but I don't expect that to be a key part of his game because he just doesn't have the traits that you would think would lead to consistent big play, explosive play threat at the wide receiver position in the NFL. About his position talent, he looks stiff, and I think that's why he didn't run the 3-corner shuttle at the combine because he does not. I'm assuming he trained in them, and his numbers were really bad against DK Metcalf, who basically failed those 2 tests. And those are important tests for a wide receiver, how you can come in and out of breaks. He has inconsistent initial quickness. He's not exactly a great off the line. He has good enough hands. They're not great. He's going to have to work on those. And he isn't polished at getting out from press coverage, so he's going to have to work on that as well. He is more of a possession receiver than one expected to be a yak machine. I don't expect him to be a big run after the catch guy. I still think he might be able to be a deep threat because he can go up and high point the ball, but he's not going to do that because of separation. He's a good blocker. He has some mental mistakes with the drops and everything. My mathematical grade for him is the end of the third. I think he's going to project him to go in the 2nd or 3rd round. People like him, so I think he might sneak into the 2nd round. But I definitely expect him to go by the end of the 3rd. There are some things to like about him, but he's going to need to be coached up and have good coaching to reach his potential. I have him as a medium ceiling and low floor. I think he's probably going to be utilized as a Z or slot. Some project him as an X, but I would need to see him do far better against press coverage and improve his route running to fill the X role, because I think against a press he can just be shut down. But if you have him as a Z or a slot where he has more room to work, might be able to take advantage of his lack of initial quickness and route running abilities early. So he's a guy who can develop, but I expect him to be a solid receiver in the NFL. But I don't think he's going to be a Pro Bowl type caliber type of player. But he does have some skills, and the 3rd round is not exactly killing a guy. So that is what I have there, and definitely we're way over time, but that is. But yeah, I got through. But yeah, that's one of the first 5 wide receivers. Definitely, probably next week, get into some more of them. I don't think it's deep at the wide receiver position, but it is definitely not exactly top heavy as far as these guys should be first round picks. I don't see that anywhere so far. But some of them are going to be first round picks based off potential. So
we'll get into that next week.
We'll see what happens. Yeah. We'll get into that. So yeah, so so teams that are expecting to get immediate production from the wide receivers, I don't think this is a draft for that. Maybe 1 or 2 will be able to do that if they're used correctly. Paris Campbell can if you stick him in the slot. Hollywood Brown could if you stick him in the slot, maybe.
Yeah, but you don't take a slot receiver that high. It's just, yeah.
I mean, there's talk that Brown and Campbell might. I guess Campbell, you could try to line him up at Z.
We'll see.
You can. I mean, you can, but if you're taking a receiver in the 1st round, you're expecting them to be a Z or X.
Usually,
would like them to be an X. But good luck expecting one of these guys to carry your pass offense in his 1st year. Like, I don't see that happening. So it's interesting. I think there's a lot of bust potential if a lot of these guys go in the 1st round. I wouldn't be shocked if one receiver goes in the 1st round, or it could be as many as 4. There shouldn't be. I don't think there should be any, but we'll see how that goes because teams are going to value these guys differently. Hollywood Brown, that would be a scare me to death Tavon Austin type flashback 1st round pick there. But I think that has that type of
That might be a
potential on
fair
it. So,
comparison at this point. We'll see.
so, but yeah, we're way over, but we do appreciate everyone that's listened, and we'll definitely be back next week.
Have a good one.